So welcome back to our series on Pro Tools for Beginners, and thanks very much for all the comments that you've been leaving, and please keep doing so. In this next part, we're going to be talking about recording, one of the most important aspects of Pro Tools. We're going to be talking about how to set up tracks, how to record levels, and how to really get this fantastic system working to your benefit. Here we go.
Okay, so before we, get into actually recording, we're going to talk a little bit about setting up the session in the first place. So I'm going to start it from scratch, as if you haven't even launched Pro Tools just yet, and we'll take you through sort of setting up a new Pro Tools session. So I'm just going to go down here to my dock and launch Pro Tools. Okay, and after a little while, after it all finds all the different plugins and so forth, it's going to come up with this particular screen, which is called the Quick Start screen. This one's a good one to always keep going. So show Quick Start dialog when Pro Tools starts. That's a really good thing to just have ticked. And so what we're going to do is, when you're starting a recording, good idea is to start with a blank session, which is just ticked here. There you can create templates and other things, or open up recent sessions, etc. But for this purpose, we're going to start with a blank session. Then you're coming down to the session parameters. Now, there's a number of different formats to choose from. I've always found, just in my experience, that if we go for a WAV file, here is in the type, you can choose AIFFs, but we stick with a sort of a standard here at AIM as a WAV. And then you can choose a bit depth of 16, 24, or 32-bit float. Again, I'm kind of opting for the middle, which is the 24-bit. I've always found that this format and this bit depth gives you good quality recordings without chewing up too much hard drive space. And again, with the sample rate here as well, we can go up to quite a number of higher sample rates here, and these do sound absolutely fantastic if you're going up to sort of 88 and 96 kilohertz sampling rates. But where your problem will happen is that it just tends to chew up a lot of hard drive space. So my standard practice is to go 24-bit, 44K, and a WAV, and that gives me good quality recordings without really chewing up an unnecessary amount of hard drive space. Then you're going into the I/O settings. Now, these are quite important, especially if you're moving your sessions around in different computers. So when you're getting started, I definitely would recommend that you don't choose last used, but you go for some of the standard ones that we've got here. So I'm going to choose stereo mix as my I/O setting, and I think this is a really good practice just to get going. We'll do a whole separate lecture on the I/Os a little bit later, but for now, let's just get into stereo mix, and now we choose OK. All right, now here it's going to ask you the name of the session, so I'm going to name it Pro Tools, if I can spell it, Pro Tools Recording. Okay, and it's very important again to find out where you're actually going to save it. So be careful where all this goes. So we're going to make sure that I'm going to just put it for now on the desktop, but it's really important that you know where you're actually starting to do your recordings from. And so we're going to now hit save. Okay, so let's now just go back to the desktop. Here. Okay, here we go, and here's our session, Pro Tools Recording. And if I click in through here, you can see that it's Pro Tools has already created folders and the PTX file, as we talked about. Remember, in the last lesson, don't move these out of the way. These are there as a purposeful link, and we need to keep them like that. Okay, so we are now into the Pro Tools windows here. So we have our edit window and our mix window. So I think normally what I do, just to kind of make sure that it's all kind of working, is I just normally create a click track. And click tracks are going to be important for you and your recording as well. So here, the way to do that is just under the track menu, and straight off right there is click track. And if you do that, Okay, a click track is now created. So it's just a standard audio auxiliary input track. All right, you can see the arrow down through there. It's auxiliary input track, and it's just got the click plugin inserted on it. So if all being well, when we play the click, it should be totally fine. We should hear this now, which we do. Okay, now the next thing you're probably going to need to determine is the actual tempo of your song. So there's a number of rulers through here that we've talked about already, and these are different types of rulers that you can make available. This green one here is the tempo ruler. Now, if you don't see that ruler right now, then the best way to go through here is where it's got this horizontal sort of dark, this black line horizontally. This will show you what rulers you're going to have. You can see that the tempo ruler is what we currently have at the moment. So if I was to actually just remove that, then the tempo ruler obviously disappears. So the tempo ruler is very important to have. And of course, the 120 beats per minute here is actually the tempo. Now, it's going to potentially be a little bit problematic here, because tempo in Pro Tools can be changed a number of different ways. So one of the ways that I can see here is that the best way to do it from this point is to actually go just double click on it, okay, and you can then change your tempo here. So let's make it 110 beats per minute, all right, and that will be fine. Okay, now sometimes it doesn't allow you to do that, all right? That you won't see this red triangle here. If that's the case, you need to change the tempo in a different type of way. It's because that the tempo track has been set up slightly different, and that is can happen from time to time. So I'm going to show you the other way of changing the tempo. So here we're going to go to the window menu and choose transport. Okay, the shortcut is Command 1 on the numeric keypad, and this dials up the transport window here. Okay, now this is sort of where this can kind of change things about your tempo. As you can see, the conductor button, this one here is on. The conductor button is making this tempo change. Now, the thing about this is that having the conductor on actually allows you to change tempos throughout various parts of the song. So we can make our tempo go up or down as we like. And that's sort of why the conductor is actually there. I tend to use the conductor the most because sometimes I do have tempo changes in my tracks. And that allows me to change the tempo from this red triangle here. But occasionally the conductor is off, like so, okay? And so you can see if I'm trying to click here, right, it doesn't allow me to change the tempo by clicking on that red triangle. And that's why you either put the conductor track on or you change the tempo here to 110 beats per minute. And that will change it as well. So 2 ways of changing the tempo. You're either in manual tempo mode, which means you then actually what happens here, you can't change any tempo at all, or you're in conductor tempo mode, which allows you to change the tempo throughout the track. So that's quite important. Okay, so we've got our tempo organized, and we've got the click track actually now happening. Click tracks are very important for you because they just do allow you to sort of play in time and just to keep things nice and I suppose in continual tempo, and that will allow you to also make edits a little bit easier later on. So it's always kind of a good idea to record music with a click. However, some styles and some genres don't actually allow really that. So if you're doing classical recordings or jazz or things like that, sometimes that isn't a good idea to run with a click track, but that's really genre dependent. So whereas I try and use it. Okay, now the other thing that you should set up straight away is a master fader track. Again, this is going to be used for just making sure that we're having good levels coming out of our entire Pro Tools system as we build the track. So I'm going to create another new track, and so I can do, remember, track new, but I'm going to use the shortcut, which is Apple Shift N or Command Shift N. So new track. And I'm going to make it a stereo master fader. Okay, and there we go. Cool, so we've got those two things there. Okay, now, so now when we play the click, okay, you can see that our master fader is showing us how much level's coming out of our Pro Tools system. So when trying to avoid it ever any track going into the red, right? So we just need to be very careful, and that's why we need to keep an eye on our master fader at pretty much all times. These track meters are very, very handy, and we need to keep an eye on that. Okay, so now we're done, and I'm going to save, right? Okay, next, we're going to have a look at the main time counter here. Okay, because I'm using a click, it absolutely makes sense for my main time counter to be in bars, beats, and ticks, so that as it goes through, we can see that the different bar numbers come through on our ruler, but you can change that to minutes and seconds if you feel like your music doesn't need to be sort of bar centric. You can do it in minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. That's another quite a popular one. So just make sure that your main time counter is good to go, bars and beats. Okay, cool. And so now we go to the next stage, which is creating now the track that we're going to record on. So again, I'm going to choose Command Shift N. And this time, because we're going to be recording an acoustic instrument, we're going to be recording it onto an audio track. So I'm using one microphone, so therefore it'll be mono. If I was using two microphones, I might then choose stereo. So if we're recording this in stereo, it would appear on the one track. But because I'm just using a standard mono mic, I'm going to stick with one and hit create. Okay, cool. Now you can order these tracks in any way you want, and there's a couple of ways of ordering it. You can just pick up the track and move it to wherever you want it. You can just shuffle them around that way. Right, or you can do it here in the tracks list. So you just move things around to your heart's content, however you want to do it. What I tend to do is I tend to have my audio tracks at the top, sort of the click track and my master stuff down at the bottom. So I'm just building with my click and my master sort of pretty much at the end. Also very important, just for good session management, is to name your tracks. So again here, I'm just going to double click, and I'm just going to call this Jace Mike. Done. Okay, so we've now got a name for the track. Always important just to keep naming things as you go in order to keep your session organized. And also it has an effect because when we're going to be recording our audio files, the name of these audio files is going to be related to the name of the track. So if you get into the habit of naming your tracks first, any recordings that you do on that track will bear the name of the actual track. So good practice to keep in mind. Okay, now the next thing to do is to work out the inputs of this track. So we're going to be recording a microphone, so we need to tell the track what inputs it's coming onto. And you can see with the audio interface that I'm using at the moment, it's got a number of inputs to choose from, okay? So it is important that if you've got a mic plugged into number one, that is going to be picked up by the appropriate input. So I'm going to make sure that it's on number one. And then this thing here is the output of the track, and it should be on pretty much the first two outputs of your audio interface, and that should be fairly straightforward. What you should at least do is just check that it's on the same as your click track, because your click track we've just heard, so we need to make sure that our output of the audio track is the same. Okay, all right, so once we've got that established, now, by the way, if you can't see these columns, then that's just a simple view, right? So one way of doing it is just to flip across to the mixer window, and this will always be here, pretty much, the input and the output. We've got the same deal, so we can change it from either from the mixer view or the edit view. If you can't see these columns in the edit view, it's just simply a view thing here. So here's showing the rulers, but here is actually showing the vertical columns here available. So here, and you need to make sure that I/O is visible. Right, and then it's all gone there. So I'm just going to make it visible for now. Sometimes it's good, just as a little tip, not to kind of have too much viewing on here, because obviously it restricts your space with the edit window. And for that reason, I'm actually just going to narrow this a little bit so I can just see more of the screen real estate. It's a good idea to keep that in mind. And so, in fact, what I'm also going to do is I'm just going to get rid of this sends column, because we're not using that for now. So that goes. Okay, cool. All right, now, just for now, I'm just going to mute this track right now, because the way I've just connected my mic in order to record this micro lecture is going to create some slight audio problems. So I'm just going to mute this track for now. Okay, and here is I now can arm the track. Okay, and as you can see, as soon as I arm the track, the signal is coming in. Okay, so you just need to make sure that when you are arming it, if you don't see a signal there, then there's a couple of things that you need to probably check. Firstly, you need to just really work through your signal flow, okay? Firstly, obviously, you need to make sure that your microphone is plugged in. You need to make sure that it's plugged into the correct input and that your track is also on the correct input, okay? And then the third thing is pretty much this, to make sure that some microphones require what's called 48 volts or phantom power. And that is done from the actual audio interface itself. So just go ahead and just check to see that you've got 48 volts switched on. There should be some kind of switch on your audio interface that would allow for that to happen. Okay, now the other important thing is the microphone level. You can see that I'm actually now recording, I'm actually setting up for a level here. And if I was to just adjust my level, now I'm just going to show you something. Flip to the mixer window. This fader, as you can see, does not adjust the actual recording level. So if I have this all the way turned down, the same recording level comes in. This just would adjust the listening level. Okay, it's not working at the moment because I've got the track muted and you're hearing my microphone through a different way. But this would allow us to change the volume of the track only. It doesn't allow you to change the recording level. The microphone's recording level is changed by the microphone preamp, and I'm just going to adjust that now a little bit. So I'm just turning it down, okay? So it's a much lower level now. Or you can make it really loud up here. So I've turned it a long way up. What you're aiming for when you're recording is typically in this sort of -6 area is a good level to record at. I actually find that you've probably got a lot more headroom up here, and I know a lot of engineers that try and drive it as kind of loud as almost it can go without it clipping. But I find that Pro Tools does tend to sound a little better in this sort of area here, or even a little bit lower, sort of between that -6 and -10. It allows plenty of room, so if the sound goes all of a sudden a little bit louder, you've got some play for it there. I think a good thing to avoid is this kind of level, sort of all the way up here somewhere, because that's really looking as if it's going to overload almost any second. And I reckon if I just talk a little bit louder, you can see now that it overloads. And that's one thing you're really trying to avoid, because it will just create a distortion in the actual recording process, and those kind of distortions, unless you're really like on the ball with it, pretty much are unrepairable. So it's much better to keep it nice and low. If you do distort, or if you do overload during recording, the best thing is to do is just to stop and just start the whole thing again by turning your mic preamp down on your audio interface and keeping it nice and low. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to go now. So I'm going to just now take you through some of the recording modes. Now, I just tend to use one of them because I find that this recording mode is by far the most useful. And it has a lot of flexibility. So firstly, you can see that the record button here has got a P on it. Now, if you cannot see the transport controls up in this area, then there's a drop-down menu on the right-hand side, and you'll see that transport is ticked. Okay. The other way, as I said, is just to open up the transport window as we did earlier. So that's Command 1 on the Mac keyboard, and you can see the transport window here. Okay, so either way is totally fine. If I've got it up here, I really don't normally use it down, have the transport window open at the time. Now, if you right click here or control click, right, either way, you will scroll through the different recording modes. Okay, now I'm not going to go into sort of all of them, but there's loop, normal, loop, destructive, and quick punch. Okay, the one I always use is quick punch. Okay, and that the reason why that is that allows me to quickly punch in and punch out of record mode, as I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later. So just make sure for now that the P button is on, and we're ready pretty much to do the recording. So I can just generally click that, okay, which is now almost ready to go for recording, and all I would have to do is press the play to get it going. Okay, but one final thing, a quick way to even just do this, because you can use the mouse, but I think it's generally quicker to just press the 3 button on the computer keyboard, and we're away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what a performance that was. So you can see that I have now made an actual recording. Now, the way the reason why this is, I've got the click tracks coming on as well. You can see that here's my voice and here's the click. So here we've got, it's a bit of an issue because the click track's actually been fed into here as well. And it's just the way that I've got setting up this movie. So if I am not happy with that recording, which I'm not, all I just simply do is either I can undo it, or I can just simply double click and hit delete, and that will just remove the recording. So I'm now just going to stop here and just rewire the sort of thing to get us back to where we were before, so I can then do the recording properly without having the click in there. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back now. Now, just between those takes here, I've just made a small change. I've just, instead of having the mic in input 1, I've just flipped it to input number 3 and plugged my microphone into there. So you'll notice that that's just a small change. And I've also created a little auxiliary track. I won't explain that. It's just really for the recording this actual lecture. So just leave that at the moment. But otherwise, we're pretty much the same. Now, one thing that you may find when you start doing this, and if I was to now unmute this track, okay, it all sounds pretty good. There's no real drama. But one thing you may find that you're going to get a problem which is called latency. Now, this is sort of like it comes across as a little bit of an echo, and I'll just sort of set that up so you can see what the problem actually is. So if I'm going to go to the setup menu now and go to playback engine. Okay, now the playback engine's a reasonably important screen on the odd time. Firstly, you need to make sure that on the playback engine, you're choosing the correct audio interface that you're using. So I'm using my Quartet at the moment, so that's where that is. It's going to, now that I've chosen it, it's going to restart. Okay, it just had to restart the whole thing because I changed from Quartet to Quartet, so there you go. Now, the other, where the problem is with latency is this screen here, this hardware buffer size. I'm just going to change this. This is on 64 samples. But what happens if I go to 1024? Have a look what happens here. Okay. All right, so you can see now or hear that there's this weird latency, kind of echo going on. And that's a problem that's going to be difficult to record with. It's even difficult speaking with. So it's important, if you're getting this kind of problem, to go and move that buffer size down to a small number. 64 or 32 samples is useful. So I'm going to go to 32. Okay, and now 32 is much, much better. Now, the problem with very small buffer sizes, though, is that if you have a lot of tracks, you may start getting errors. So whilst the small buffer size is useful to avoid latency, if you've got a lot of tracks, the Pro Tools session might not play that well in the first place. But I'll give you some techniques and tips a little bit later on how maybe to change that. So, okay, so we're now pretty much ready to go. I've got my channel unmuted. I'm in quick punch record mode. I'm ready to go. I've got a good recording level here. In fact, I might just change this because that's a little low now. Just going to boost up with my, okay, I'm just boosting up with my audio interface. You can see that actually as I'm changing my apogee, it just changes on here on the screen as well. Okay, that's all sounding pretty good. All right, so I'm now pretty much ready to go for my recording. So I'm just going to now, I'm going to do a 4-bar or a 1-bar count-in and just start counting up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, another beautiful performance there. Now, so I should be able to hear this back. So I'm just going to mute the click for the moment. Okay, and just sort of play it somewhere here. 1, 2, all right, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, sounding fantastic. Now, occasionally when you play this, 1, 2, you might not actually hear the track. And that's another little kind of Pro Tools thing that happens occasionally. So I'm just going to take you through that. Just ensure that under the track menu, you've got input only monitoring unticked. So if this was ticked now, okay, when I play it, okay, you can see that it's actually now not coming back at you, okay? So you need to make sure that the input only monitoring is not on, okay? A way to play this would be to take this track out of record mode, 1, and then that would work, but it's actually better if you have it on auto input monitoring. So make sure that's ticked so that 1, you can hear 2, it play 3, 4. Okay, cool. Now, let's just say that that was just such a fantastic performance, but I reckon there's a better one in me. So I'm going to actually now do what's called a drop-in. And this is kind of where Quick Punch is just so useful, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop in. And the way you kind of can do that is just at the point where, let's just say this is number 4 here, all right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to actually drop in at number 4 and then drop out before it hits number 5. Okay. So the way I'm going to do that is to simply just press the 3 button. So play it from here somewhere, and then after number 3, just press the actual 3 button to pop it into record mode, or press the record button here to pop in and out of record. So I might just do it from here so you can see what's going on. Okay, I'm just going to play. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and that's allowed me to drop in on the actual recording. So that's very useful. So it allows you to hear what's going on, and then at the time that you actually want to press, you can actually just drop in at that time. And that's why Quick Punch is really, really handy. Okay, Quick Punch has got some other advantages that we'll just go through a little bit later, but it just allows you to drop in and drop out at any point in time. Okay, cool. So that is the first part of the recording. Now let's record another track. So we can actually just go through the same process again: track, create a new audio track. Obviously, that's what we'd be doing. But even a quicker way is to actually duplicate the track, because we want the same input, the same output, everything pretty much the same. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take this out of record mode, okay? And now I'm going to just simply right-click and choose duplicate. Okay, now here, when duplicating tracks, do we want the active playlist? So basically, do we want these audio regions that's already active in here? Well, we don't really want that. We don't want any alternative playlists, and we don't want any automation, because the automations, there's none anyway, so that really doesn't matter for any of those. So we're just going to click OK. All right. And there is now my duplicate track with the same input, the same output, same volume, everything's the same here. So that's kind of useful if you want to quickly do the same things twice. So I'm going to now just simply rename this Jace Mic 2. All right. And now I'm going to simply put this one into record mode, and we're ready to go one more time. So again, this is quite good if you've just got a couple of guitar parts or a couple of keyboard parts or vocal parts to do, and obviously we would be hearing this one, so we're kind of singing along with it, but just recording it simply on a different track. I'm going to keep the click in as well, so I'm going to unmute that, go back to the beginning, and just press 3 on my numeric keyboard to get it recording again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, again, another emotionally charged performance there. Now you can see number 2 is a little bit kind of hardcore, so I'm going to re-record that. I'm just going to drop that one in. So again, I'm going to play, and you can do it from, again, so you're hitting spacebar to get it started, and then when you want to drop in record, you just hit the 3 button, which is what I'm going to do now. 1, 2, 3, and that's much better recording now. And of course, you can solo, you can mute, you can do whatever you need to do on each of these tracks. So this is now how we've been able to quickly record and drop in basic recordings. I hope that's been of use to you. Don't forget, we've just got to save, so Pro Tools knows what it's doing here. So hopefully that's been useful. If you've got any questions about that, don't forget to just send me a quick message on the YouTube, and we'll see you next time for some MIDI recording. Thanks.
So I hope you enjoyed that installment, and stay tuned for the next one. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to AIM TV and check out some of the other how-to videos on that channel. Till next time, see you later.